Yo, what is up, fans? We are here. We are live again, and we are back. I am here on the Bulls Fan Podcast. We're here talking all Chicago Bulls all the time. Today I have actually a very, very special guest for you guys. My man Jack Silverstein, Jack M. Silverstein, I believe. Great guy. Chicago historian, reporter, very, very, very well known around the scenes for just being all things Chicago sports and being involved with them. He has some new projects coming up that he'll hop into and talk about in a quick second. But this show is for Bulls fans. It's for Bulls fans, for you guys to be able to get your opinions off, get your takes off. I do have a voicemail number. I'll have that pop up as well so that way you guys can see it. Right there, right below. Make sure you click that voicemail number. Drop me a call. I'll play your voicemails on the coming show. We're gonna just have a call, a show where I go through all the voicemails. But as always on the Bulls Fan Podcast, we talk Chicago Bulls. So I'm gonna go ahead and bring in my man Jack Silverstein. Read Jack on Twitter. Talk to us, Jack. How you been? Thank you for joining me on the show.
I appreciate it, man. I've been good. Everybody's happy and healthy, and I mean, these moves have been eye-opening. A colleague of mine, a buddy of mine from Windy City Gridiron, when we had Ball and Caruso, and we didn't have DeRozan yet, but there was chatter, and he tweeted something like, "I know Reed Jack is out there somewhere jumping for joy," and I said, I'm not just yet. And he was surprised, and I said, the jumping for joy bar is Khalil Mack, or John Lester, or Justin Fields was a jumping for joy bar, and I'm not there with this. And I said, but boy, DeRozan would change the equation, and just letting it all sink in once that was locked in. Boy, we have a really fun, intriguing, deep team that feels like it has direction. There's purpose. I know that there are some people who are wondering how are Zach and DeMar going to play next to each other. That doesn't really bother me that much. And you don't see a weakness necessarily. I mean, we don't have an MVP of the league. Yeah. But
according to my show co-host Pavi, he believes he literally told me less than 2 weeks ago that Zach LaVine has potential to be the MVP, and I said you're on drugs.
So I wouldn't. I won't go as far as either of you. What I will say is that one thing that's very promising that I was thinking about, and this was prior to all these additions, is that we've seen a real performance bump from guys coming out of Team USA. Going back to the 06 FIBA games in Japan. And a number of guys have had big boosts, whether it's, Carmelo's first scoring title was coming off of an Olympics. You had coming off of the 08 Olympics, you had Kobe breaking through with a title. You had LeBron winning his first MVP. You had Dwayne Wade with his scoring title. Derek's MVP year was after the 2010 FIBA games. Kevin Durant's MVP year was 14 after the 14 FIBA games. He'd already been in the Olympics, but you see a number of boosts like this. Even Heinrich made an all-defensive team after the Japan game. Captain Kirk. I mean, people forget he was on that FIBA team in 06. And
yeah, definitely did forget.
Yeah, there are a lot of them like that. So, it's got to be that focused competition, that intense competition over the summer, the realization that you're playing with you're the very best, all of your peers. And we can talk about how, I saw someone call it the all couch team, 12 guys and team who aren't playing, who could beat this team. But regardless, it's a major, major upgrade. And, we saw our friend Big Dave from the Bulls Outsiders, Ball Sports, who had noted earlier this year, and this stat has recently blown up, that the Olympics are the first time since UCLA that Zach has been on a team that's won 4 straight games.
That's pretty nuts.
Not counting, I guess
nuts.
the Bulls had a run, but he was out with an injury. So in terms of what he's been involved in, this is the first time. And you heard about Wade and LeBron talking about how monumental it was to be able to watch Kobe work. And even Barkley, who was the star in many ways, the breakout star in Barcelona, he was the Dream Team's leading scorer. He comes off of that, and obviously he was traded to Phoenix that summer. He goes and
wins an MVP.
And wins an MVP. So there's a pretty nice pattern of guys having a jump in performance, in accomplishment, following international play, U.S. guys. And I definitely see that coming with Zach.
Yeah, 100%, 100%. I put it this way. I said on my first episode of this show that Zach reminds me of Devin Booker, but I've also had this argument with Pavi where I don't think Zach is as good as Devin Booker. But my biggest criticisms toward Devin Booker are my biggest criticisms towards Zach. And I know Zach was passing the ball last year, but I think Zach, in order for him to hit an MVP caliber level, has to learn to distribute the ball and learn to become a playmaker first and a shooter/scorer second. And I know that, his innate scoring abilities are amazing, and he can shoot the lights out, almost 90, 50, 40 last year. But when it comes down to creating other opportunities for other people, I know his team hasn't necessarily been the best, but I've watched Russell Westbrook with subpar teams make other guys better, give other guys career years around him, even though he was still averaging 30. And I think Zach has another level to go in terms of making his teammates better, which maybe it comes from, as you mentioned, getting a gold medal, if they actually win the gold medal game tonight. But I assume that they will win the gold medal. But even if they don't win the gold medal, as you mentioned, it's great experience for Zach. He just has to hit another level because now, as I mentioned as well in the last episode, this is no longer a ragtag group of, of nobodies that they're pulling together trying to say, hey, make the playoffs. You have an actual squad now. You have a legitimate number 2 now in DeMar DeRozan in terms of a number 2 scoring option.
This is a go get home court team. Exactly.
So I know you have a couple new newsletters and projects coming out. Let's talk about those. Talk to me about kind of what's going on in your sphere, what's going on in your space. Talk to the people.
Definitely. So I am working on what is kind of surprisingly going to be the first ever book on the Bulls dynasty.
Really?
And there are obviously a ton of books that go after one element. Sort of, the Jordan Rules is about one season. Blood on the Horns is about one season. There are certainly books about, there's biographies of Jordan. Phil has his books. Wennington has a book. Luke Longley, I haven't been able to find it, but Luke Longley has a book. Rodman has books. Scottie's coming out with a memoir this year, but there's no book that actually just addresses the entire dynasty from start to finish, and not just what happened on the court, but everything around it, the culture around it, the way that the Bulls became a driving force, and in some ways the driving force of popular culture. It wasn't just about what was happening on the court. It was about the ways in which they were part of your wardrobe.
Yeah.
They were on, your clothes. I mean, look at what you're wearing right now. That's right. And the dentist behind you. They were.
Shout out to my guy Banks, by the way. These
there you go.
Both of these jerseys are gifts, and they're actually authentic Mitchell and Ness. Hardwood Classic jerseys.
Love it.
Well, this is the Mitchell and Ness. Yeah, they're both Mitchell and Ness, and this one is actually the Jordan jersey from '97-'98. So shout out to my guy Banks for these gifts. I know I'm wearing them on the set, but these are actually gifts because someone knew that I was a Chicago Bulls fan. It's like, I got 2 authentic Bulls jerseys. Do you want them? And I said, yes, please. So go ahead,
please.
Continue.
That's great. No, but that's exactly it. And the way that no matter where you were, whether in Chicago or I was in Evanston and then Wilmette, or if you were in Gary, no matter where you were in the city, in the state, you sort of touched the dynasty in really personal ways. Everybody has a story where there was some kind of personal intersection of one of the players or a coach, and there are just so many stories. It's very rich. And so I am working on this book, and I am collecting all my research and distributing it in a newsletter, which is readjack.substack.com. I did an interview, for example, with a guy named Chris Mott, who was a Bulls ball boy. He was like the #1 Bulls ball boy. He was on Oprah. He was in that famous Sports Illustrated article by Rick Riley, the one that had them all playing cards on the plane in the cover.
Yeah.
And he was at Scottie's wedding. He became like a little brother. He had like a little brother, big brother relationship with Pip. So he was at his wedding, and his stories are amazing. I talked to Jim Irwin, who was the team's sound engineer at Chicago Stadium. So he was actually the person who would press play on Sirius or on Rock and Roll Part 2.
Yeah.
And the guy who struck the deal between the Bulls and Carson Peary Scott. So the reason that you had to go to Carson Peary Scott to get your Bulls gear the day after a championship was this guy, John Beecham. And a great interview with Scott Williams. And then the other big one, I think we talked about it last year, was I got Richard Esquinas' first Bulls interview since 1993. So he had done because he went into yoga, he had done other interviews on other subjects. But I got his first MJ interview in 27 years. The ones that I've got coming up this week, I've got one with a high school basketball coach in Florida who runs the triangle with his team because he learned it under Tex Winter when he was a young coach. His father was coaching, and he said this was 95, 96, and he said that he wanted to somehow see the Bulls practice, and his father cold called the Bulls, and Tex invited them to come to practice. It was in the first weeks that we had traded for Rodman.
Crazy. And
obviously it was Jordan's first training camp since 93. Yeah. So they were really kind of starting the triangle from scratch almost, because Rodman was new. Harper was a new starter in like a different role. Longley had the starting job, and there was a lot to do. So he talked about watching them practice and watching, how Tex would instruct the greatest team ever on the crispness of their chest passes and running spacing drills and stuff like that, which I thought was really neat. Amazing. And then there's a Luke Longley documentary out, the Australian story. It's a documentary show, half-hour show on Australia's ABC, which is like our PBS or the BBC. It's public television, and they did a doc on Longley, and they got Jordan to participate, and Pip.
Oh, okay,
and Phil,
okay. That's where all
Steve
these
Kerr.
New clips of Jordan are coming from. Okay.
Correct. So they, so I interviewed the producer, and I'm going to have it out Monday morning because part 2 of the documentary airs Monday. Okay. She said that when they reached out to Jordan, he was interested, but they contacted a manager and they received a thanks but no thanks email. So Luke then emailed MJ personally, and MJ was like, yeah, I'm in. Absolutely. And they sent a film crew to his golf course in Florida, and then they remoted in, the feed so that they could interview him from Australia.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy stuff.
Yeah.
I'm very excited about it. Tell the people where they can find that again.
Absolutely. So that's readjack.substack.com. And you can, this is the way I always say it, and if you understand what I'm saying, then this newsletter is for you. You can subscribe for the low price of packs in a month or Pip in a year.
All right. Perfect. Amazing. All right. So speaking of dynasty talk, Scotty versus Phil, or Scotty versus whoever, because apparently, I mean, not only to sell bourbon, but I think Scotty has some genuine beefs with people.
100%.
What are your thoughts? Number one, on Scottie Pippen's GQ article where he called out The Last Dance, basically saying it was a Michael Jordan fluff piece, or a commercial. That's basically what he equated it to, as well as he called Phil Jackson a racist, which was interesting. But then I've seen a few different Reddit threads and a few different quotes from Phil starting, I believe, in the 70s. haven't been necessarily the best quotes when talking about his black players. What are your thoughts about the whole fiasco involving Scotty, and do you think that it's just Scotty trying to sell some, bourbon?
So first of all, I will never just outright negate someone's experience or their viewpoint. And I think Scotty does have, certainly, I think Scotty has real beef and a legitimate cause to be disappointed. My understanding is that the original footage that was being shot in 97, 98 was supposed to capture this final season. It probably felt more like, a team documentary, and that's how they advertised it originally. And it definitely, we knew it was going to reflect well on Michael. We knew he wasn't going to give that level of participation. And then when you saw he was, one of the producers, and you see his team on there, so you know what it is. But I certainly was hoping for a much broader story, and that was not there. So as for the Scotty Phil stuff, there are a couple of pieces to parse out here. In terms of the 1.8 seconds, which was the heart of his complaint, and he said that Phil gave Tony the shot because he wanted a white player to succeed. So there's two things here. The first is that just from a basketball standpoint, Tony had 3 game winners that season, buzzer beaters, including one on the exact play, the exact half-court set that we ran in the 1.8 seconds. It's the famous game where Reggie hit what looked like a game winner at Chicago Stadium, and he bowed to the crowd, but there was a little bit of time left on the clock, maybe like 0.8 seconds. And we ran the same play with Scotty inbounding the ball, with Tony starting, around like in the lane and then popping out up toward the elbow, and then catching and shooting. And you can see Pip in the shot. He's like, and then when it goes in, he's like, yeah, and he's very fist up in the air. So it's not like he was some kind of malcontent.
Yeah.
There was a basketball reason to do it that way. And Phil had talked throughout at different points in his career about, almost getting, I won't say he was getting too smart for his own good, but he would talk about, we'll use Michael as a decoy here. You will use this, So there's some basketball things that I think are legitimate. Now, is Phil a racist? Phil has said some racist things. There are definitely there are players who are going to say Phil's not a racist because I've dealt with him and I know, and I'm not going to deny that experience either. I will read the quotes, and I don't know what you saw from the 1970s, but here is Phil in Melissa Isaacson's book Transition Game, which was reported during the 93-94 season and was released right before the 95 season. And the Bulls in 94 had traded Stacey for Luke Longley, which gave us a roster of 6 white players and 6 black players. And there was starting to be some chatter were the Bulls trying to play to a white audience, and maybe the idea was, all right, if you're not even going to win a championship, pack them in. I don't know. But here's what Phil said. And this is pretty bad, in my opinion. The style of basketball we play and the system we use happens to be conducive to a lot of skills white players have, spot shooting, ball movement, and cutting, as opposed to power basketball, usually indigenous to the skills black players have, one-on-one moves, quickness, jumping ability. So that's So
God damn, Phil.
That's the essence.
Phil,
in many ways.
Whoa.
That's the essence in many ways of racism in sports.
Whoa. Phil.
And we've
Jesus.
seen it.
I'm
gonna let that sink.
I've read it, but I've never heard anyone else say it out loud. Jesus, that sounds bad, Phil. Man, and sorry for being blasphemous, but man, that sounds terrible, Phil. That sounds very racist.
That sounds very racist. That is that is racist. That is the essence of racism in sports.
Yeah.
This idea that that a white authority figure is going to define black players by their physical attributes and white players by their mental attributes.
Yeah.
When you've got Michael Jordan, who's like the smartest guy to ever play, or one of
one
top
of them,
tier. Yeah, and you've got Scotty, who also his basketball IQ
is
just
off the charts.
Off the charts, and at the same time, you have Tony Kukoc, whose nickname coming over, forget the waiter, was Europe's Magic Johnson.
Yeah.
And Tony had all the if Tony was black, he would have caught so much more hell for.
Really?
I think so, because he was streaky.
Yeah.
He didn't defend.
Yeah, true.
He was, and then his physical gifts off the charts.
Yeah. So
for Phil to look at the roster and say that is the essence of sports racism. I mean, it's how we see. It's what happens with quarterback evaluations.
Yeah, it's what happens with the NFL finally dropping that. That I don't know. They had like some program in which they were using to like level out, I guess, the mental capacity of black players versus white players, which I guess they finally decided to stop using that system. But that system within itself is racist. I think it's been racist to say black quarterbacks can only be wide receivers because they aren't smart enough to play quarterback. I think that's, you know what I mean? I've been feeling like that. So the fact that even that's coming from one of the greatest basketball coaches of all time, that just leads more and more credibility to everything that Scotty was saying. Because I'll put it this way, as a black man that's worked in corporate America for the past decade, as well as in entertainment, I know when I'm being talked to in a racist manner and when someone is just being cool and chill.
Right.
And so Scotty being around Phil 24/7, 365, or at least not 365, but at least for them 180 nights a year when they're on the road together and spending time together, you know where you stand. Exactly. And also at that point in time, those guys weren't making the money that they're making now. And they also didn't have the same level of communication with the general public as they did back then. So even if he wanted to air his grievances out with Phil on social media, he couldn't, you know what I mean? And also he wasn't a high enough paid player to be able to air these grievances in the media and still necessarily, be in the same standing. Like we all know what Scottie Pippen's contract situation was. So I'm sure a lot of the times he felt like he just needed to shut up and take it. But also Phil wouldn't say these things in front of Michael or to Michael because he knows Michael would have tried to attack him.
It's also interesting kind of what books and what reporters have become accepted as canon in Bulls lore and what kind of exists outside of that. Because if that quote had been in the Jordan rules, we would have heard about it. Yeah,
exactly. So, but we didn't.
Here's another one. This is from you mentioned we were talking about black quarterback evaluations. Remember, this was the story a couple of months ago. And this is the NPR headline. The NFL will stop assuming racial differences when assessing brain injuries. Remember all the CTE stuff and all the concussion settlements?
Yeah.
They were trying to pay black players less.
Really?
Basically on the basis. It was basically on the basis of saying there's no good way to say this. They were basically saying black players are already cognitively impaired.
What? Come on.
And that's basically what they were saying. Okay, so the more
and more I interact with the behind the scenes NFL interworkings at NFL, the more I don't understand why black people still play in the NFL. Well, I have a hard time even watching it now.
Okay, so here's another quote from Phil. This is from 2012. Grantland did a story on the triangle offense, and Phil had always described. Or in many places, I had always seen him describe the triangle in terms of jazz because of the opportunities for improvisation, but you still have to kind of know the structure.
There's definitely a racial subtext to that as well.
Well, it's about to get worse. But the idea is that because the way that the triangle works is it's all read and react.
Yeah.
And so there are sort of set actions, but there are no traditionally set plays, and everybody can go wherever. And that was part of, now obviously you have MJ and Scotty,
Yeah.
and then Tony, Dennis, one of the best passers out of the post and all that. But, and you have to defend Kerr and Craig Hodges and BJ and Pax for three. But the idea was that anybody can score at any time and anybody can play any spot. Okay. So he always described it as jazz. But here he is in 2012. The triangle is extremely simple. Quote, the triangle is extremely simple. You just need enough energy to get up and down the floor because it's a 94-foot offense. Everything happens in 4/4 time, like rap music. That's how I always describe the tempo to players. So he's telling the press that it's like jazz, but he's explaining it to his players that it's like rap. However, not however.
Jeez.
All right.
We gotta apologize the black community who said Scotty might have been tripping just because he was mad at MJ. We owe Scotty an apology, G.
Okay.
We do. The whole NBA community owes Scotty an apology because they made Scotty look crazy when he said this shit.
Okay. Now I want to add something. Now I'm going to add something to this.
Okay.
Okay. And again, my whole point here is, were there basketball reasons for calling the play for Tony? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Is Phil Jackson also a racist?
It's not out of the realm of possibility.
It's not.
And based upon what he said, honestly, I gotta go with yes.
He participates in racism. He certainly
If you participate in racism, you're a racist.
You're a racist. All right, so here...
Even if you work with a bunch of black people, and that goes for all my white people out there, just because you work with a bunch of black people don't mean you're not racist. You can not be intolerant and still be a racist.
Right. Okay. So now remember, all right, and it's all kind of... Part of what I like to do is you pull from all sorts of different sources and you start to put pieces together and then make evaluations and make fair judgments and draw conclusions. And if you can stand by your conclusion, then it's your conclusion, and there we are. So remember, in 2012, he tells Grantland that the way that he explains the tempo of the offense to his players is to say that it's a 4/4 beat like rap music. Okay. Which
most music is made. Which as someone who makes music,
Jack, please. Yes.
As someone who makes music, I literally produce beats and make beats.
Yeah.
And a lot of the background music for the shows that we make here on HNB Media, I'm making the background beats for. So 99% of popular music is literally on a 4/4 measure.
Okay.
Most everything is on a 4/4 measure. It's when you get to classical music where people will use like a 3/4 measure or something like that. But 99% of music, popular music that we listen to in America, is on a 4/4 scale. So that within itself is racist because you could just say, oh, he could use the Bee Gees and still be able to get the same point across.
Right.
Go ahead.
Okay. Now, take that and wed it to this. And this is, I'm trying to remember when Scoop wrote this, but it was when he was at Page 2 and he started there in 2005. So this was 2005, 2006, somewhere in there. Scoop Jackson, my mentor, my friend.
Shout out to Chicago legend.
Shout out to Chicago legend. And he wrote a piece called Sacred Ignorance. And he included 2 quotes. And this is from October of 1999. Okay. So right when he had started with the Lakers. He said, I don't mean to say that, and that's bracketed, as a snide remark toward a certain population in our society, but they have a limitation of their attention span. A lot of it probably due to too much rap music going on in their ears and coming out their being.
Yeah, this man is on OD racism. What about all the white kids that love rap music? What about them?
And then October of 2005, quote, I think it's important that the players take their end of it, get out of the prison garb and the thuggery aspect of basketball that has come along with hip-hop music in the last 7 or 8 years.
Jesus, Phil.
So if he's
hip-hop at that point in time had been alive for 20 years at that point in time. And also at that point in time, white people were buying more records than African Americans were. So his entire conversation is factually ignorant.
Then we remember the posse comment with LeBron.
Yeah.
Okay.
Him and his posse are, yeah.
Okay, so I think we can look at Scotty's comments. I mean, listen, Scotty talks a lot. And he's on the record where he has contradictory views over the course of some months. This guy's the GOAT, this guy's the GOAT, et cetera, et cetera. He's also selling a book and bourbon and drinking the bourbon while selling the book. I mean, it's very easy to kind of look at these interviews and go, oh, Scotty talking shit. But
honestly, what do they say? A drunk mind tells sober thoughts.
There you go. But listen, Phil Jackson has a history.
Yeah.
And like I said, I'm never going to deny someone's experience. And that means, Stacey King gave an interview where he was like, Phil's not a racist. Like, I dealt with Phil and all this. And I
hate it when black people do that. I'm sorry.
I'm not going to. No, I hear you. I'm not going to deny anyone's experience.
Yeah.
And say, no, what you experienced was wrong or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm just going to say that Phil Jackson has said some heinous racist things repeatedly over the course of decades.
Yes.
And if that spilled out at points between Scotty and Tony in 94, I wouldn't be surprised.
I wouldn't either, especially when those two are the two stars of the team at that point in time. And if you're Phil, you're watching Scotty and you're thinking, man, why can't you be Michael? Right? And that resentment just kind of boils out into this racist frustration that he has because now that Michael is no longer around, I don't give a damn how I speak to you. As I mentioned before, like his contract situation was terrible. Like Scotty wasn't going to rock the boat too hard. He tried. He literally went on TV during the All-Star break talking about, I want to get traded, and it never happened. So he tried, but
he tried everything. He leaked his own rumor.
He tried everything, and it didn't work. So the organization was much more powerful than Scottie Pippen, which makes sense why he would be in the position to where he felt as if he was voiceless. And if there was some inner locker room racial tension, not between Kukoc and Scottie, because Scottie actually said that he likes Kukoc, and I believe Kukoc was at Scottie's bourbon party or whatever that they had before the release. So Scottie is going to be Tony's presenter into the Hall of Fame. Yeah. So I'm saying all this to say, it's not that Scottie has an issue with Kukoc, because if he had an issue with Kukoc, we would know about his issue with Kukoc. It's clear that he feels this way about Phil Jackson, and that is the whole thing that everybody kind of overlooked, because they were like, oh, well, you were just mad you didn't get the last shot. It's no. I don't have a problem with Tony. Me and Tony are fine. We're like this. My problem was with the guy behind my friend that was being like, yo, let me supersede you or usurp you for this guy because I feel this way about black players. And you're not going to hear or see this when dealing with Michael, because Michael was the star of the show. He literally traveled with security and a video team for the last season of our play, even though it was supposed to be about the team. So why does anyone think that Michael and Phil would have an issue when involving racism? It's like, you're not going to do that with Michael. You know what I mean? You're going to fall in line with Michael because of his star. But when it comes to the guy that's getting paid $1 million a year, you shut up. Fall in line, boy, and do what you're told, because you're not as smart as Tony. Scotty the whole time is like, what the fuck? Go ahead.
Right. The other things that were happening then with Scotty and Tony is that, so first of all, obviously there had been that beef between Scotty and the organization and Michael and the organization about Kukoc when they were earmarking, weirdly enough, they were earmarking $1.8 million for Tony that didn't go to Pip. 1.8 million, 1.8 seconds.
Yeah.
So they're earmarking 1.8 million for Kukoc. And then 93-94 was the year that Michael retired, and it was Tony's first year with the team. So there was a star power thing that was happening there as well. I remember a WGN broadcast when they would have the previews, tonight at 7, Bulls and Magic. And it was like Tony Kukoc and the Chicago Bulls. And I'm like, and Scotty had said to the press that he thought that that Bulls fans were being racist in their support for Tony and that they had turned on him a little bit.
Yeah.
So there's a lot there. I also think, despite the basketball argument, you should just give the last shot to Pip, because at that point we're down 0-2. We've blown this big lead. Coming into that possession, we had blown like an 18-point lead, and nobody really thought that we were gonna. All right, not only did nobody think we were gonna win a championship, but there were people predicting that we'd be a low East team. We may not make the playoffs. And instead, Scotty puts out this MVP caliber season, and we go into the last weekend of the season with a chance for the number 1 seed. And we ended up in the 3 seed, but just 2 games behind. I think the Hawks won 57, and the Knicks won maybe they won 56 or 57, and we won 55. So he gets us right there, and at that point, give him a shot. And if you lose and you miss, first of all, as Phil, the heat's not going to be on you necessarily. Probably be more on Pip. But regardless, you lose, you go down 3-0. We weren't going to win this series anyways. I mean, you can kind of always fall back on that. And if you hit it, you've given this player who gave everything and turned out this MVP caliber season, a real gift that he had earned. But still, like it shows your gratitude and shows your confidence and your faith. So I would have done that. You can't argue with results. Tony hit the shot, but there's a lot going on there. But Phil Jackson, racist.
Yes,
he's not racist. Yeah,
you don't have to say it. I will. Yes,
yeah.
Based upon what I have read, it sounds like every racist white guy I've been around that tried to tell me that I was somewhere because of things other than my mind, even though I work in this field where in order to be the best, you have to have a good mind.
Yeah,
which is usually every sport, with probably the exception of sprinting. But even then, as a sprinter, you have to understand breath control. And be smart enough to utilize your energy and know when to turn it on and when to, you know what I mean? So it's
There's
all
no
very
athlete at the highest level who hasn't mastered both the mental and the physical.
Yeah, even if you look at a guy like Jameis Winston is a guy that has all of the physical tools, but he has not mastered the mental side of the game, which is the reason why he can throw 35 touchdowns but throw 35 interceptions. Right? But Patrick Mahomes, black quarterback, dad as darker than me. Right. He has mastered the mental side of the game as well as with having amazing physical attributes. Therefore, he is at a God level pace 3-4 years into his career. So in order for you to be a God level player or athlete in any sport, I believe you have to have some level of superior intellect. No one just goes out there and sheerly makes it off athleticism. So I think all of those criticisms and those remarks by Phil Jackson, they sound pretty damn racist to me. But moving on,
it is Phil Jackson racist. It is racism.
It is. It's unfortunate though, because he's had such a huge part in shifting black culture as being part of Michael Jordan's basketball team, because Michael Jordan shifted black culture as well as hip hop culture, the culture that Phil Jackson hates so much, and Kobe as well. You're right, 100%. So it's interesting that those two would be able to succeed and be so great while having to deal, with Phil. But also, as I mentioned before, those guys are the stars, and I don't care what anyone says. There's nothing a racist white guy loves more than a star black athlete. I'll leave it at that. I will leave it at that. So let's go ahead. Let's talk Chicago Bulls for this year, 2021-2022 season. I said last year I have some very ambitious goals for the Bulls, but guess what? I'm aiming high. I don't care. I believe Billy Donovan finally has the team that he can, take over the East with. I don't think they will win the championship, But I do think depending on an injury here or injury there or a missed circumstance here or a missed shot or a foot on the line here or there,
Right.
they could wind up in the Eastern Conference Finals depending upon who gets who in the initial rounds.
Yeah.
It also, I think, depends on the 76ers, because the 76ers are a team where I think if the Bulls get matched up with them in the second round, they could beat the 76ers, because the 76ers still have the wild card of Ben Simmons, and you never know when he's going to show up to play. And I think Vucevic and DeMar can probably cancel out Embiid. So can Zach LaVine and Lonzo Ball cancel out the rest of the 76ers, which I think is actually possible, especially having reported and watched Tobias Harris in Los Angeles. He is not that guy as the third option. He's really like a fourth option. But yeah, you know what I mean? So I have lofty goals for this team. I think that Zach LaVine can average a little bit less than he did last year on the same shooting splits. I think DeMar DeRozan is going to average around 23 points a game. I think Vucevic is going to take a step back in scoring, but he's going to take less shots and be able to create more rebounding opportunities. And I think Lonzo Ball is going to have the best year of his career. If you look at Jason Kidd's career trajectory, and I'm not saying Lonzo Ball is going to be Jason Kidd, but if you look at their career trajectory, it's damn near like this. It's literally parallel in terms of their numbers, in terms of how terrible they were for the first year or so, 2 years, and then eventually they right the ship. Jason Kidd is a guy, they used to call him Asen because he had no J, and he finished his career, I believe, top 10, top 5 in three-point field goals made all time. So I think the Bulls have a good, solid foundation for the next 3 to 4 years, and I think it begins this year. I have their over-under this year at 53 wins. I know when we discussed this before, you made the same face. So talk to me. How are you feeling about this year's Bulls? What are your roundabout predictions? We don't have to get too finite with the predictions because I know you're not a prediction guy, but let's talk about it.
No, I've tried to stray away from the prediction game. I think I make that face because 53 sounds doable, which then is kind of scary. Yeah. And whenever you start to actually put numbers to concepts, they make, then it's more real.
Yeah.
Boy, I like this team. I like this team a lot. And a couple things come to mind. One, I don't see an obvious weak point in the starting lineup, provided that Pat Williams continues his development, and provided that DeMar DeRozan has a couple, maybe 2 more years of what he's been doing. And could Zach have a Booker, Trae Young, Luka like playoff series in him?
I hope so.
I think so. I mean, the other interesting thing about the NBA in recent history is that if you can stay at a certain level, you can win all of a sudden because you get that one star. Yeah. And we saw that with the Raptors. I wouldn't quite say we saw it with Phoenix because their rise was so much more steep. But the addition of Chris Paul all of a sudden, changed that team. The addition of Kawhi from DeMar DeRozan just changed that team. We were talking about the mid 90s, mid three-peat Bulls teams. And we went from, in 95, a team that was struggling to stay at 500, and all of a sudden MJ's back, and now we go 13-4. And then you add Dennis, and now you've won 72 games. And listen, Jordan and Rodman, these guys aren't just hanging around, but the way that today's player views the role of personal agency in their career, things can change. Things can change fast. And I do think that it's in the back of everybody's head, boy, it'd be cool to be the next person to lead the Bulls to a championship. Yeah. After MJ. And we had a lot of organizational problems that kept people from wanting to do that. I mean, Carmelo Anthony talked about how he was swayed away from the Bulls in the summer of 2014 because he was hearing that they weren't going to keep this group together. It's always about kind of what bad rumor, what bad take, what bad word is coming out of the organization. Dwayne Wade talked about that when they were looking at, when those guys all ended up in Miami, that there was a possibility of coming here, and he said that like the loyalty wasn't there. Kevin Garnett talked about that, and that stigma has remained over 2+ decades. But I have to imagine that with the degree to which the Bulls remain popular from a cultural standpoint, and then the way that The Last Dance hit last year and reflamed all this, I have to imagine that there are players who kind of look and say, boy, if the opportunity was just right, I'd like to go do it. I think what's interesting about this Bulls team as constructed is, if these guys really get to like each other and play well together, then that could be a team that has a little bit of a run for, 2-3 years. And maybe there is a breakthrough moment coming. Yeah. You don't know. I'm excited.
It's possible. It's possible. I'm definitely excited as well. What are your thoughts on Lonzo Ball? Do you have any thoughts on Lonzo Ball and what he could potentially add? Do you think that we finally have the point guard that we've been searching for?
I like him. I don't love him, but but I liked his progression. I liked him certainly more the last few years than what he looked like in LA, where he just. Whatever, if it was a combination of being young, being too close to home.
Just a rookie. He was just a rookie. As someone who was here, he was just a rookie. And then
you were there.
And he was just a rookie. His rookie year was actually a good year. Like statistically, it wasn't good, but if you watch the Lakers every day, him and Brandon Ingram were the reason to watch the Lakers. Yeah. And him more specifically because you could see flashes of what he was in college.
Right.
But then LeBron comes and takes the ball out of your hand, as well as Brandon Ingram's hand. So there is no more player. Once LeBron comes, there is no more player development. Right. You have to learn on the fly, and I just don't think he was built that way. He still needed to learn more as he changed his jump shot, because his jump shot had to go through a complete metamorphosis, because he used to come all the way around. Now he just goes straight up with his jump shot. You can't learn that while you're playing on a team with LeBron and you're the number 2 pick. You have to be ready-made. And I think he was much more of a 3 to 5 year long development, which now he's going into year 5. Right. And the Lakers needed 2 years, 3 years total for them to win a championship. And obviously he wasn't as valuable as Anthony Davis, so you have to give him out. Get him out of there. I think the biggest thing that he adds to them is that Lonzo Ball is a true 6'6", 6'8". He's actually a real 6'6", 6'8" tall player. So he can switch 1 really through 4 now with today's wings, which I think will allow the Bulls to be able to hide Zach on defense. And when they play point guards that aren't that great, you can hide Zach on the point guard. And when they play shooting guards that aren't that great, you can hide Zach on the shooting guard. I think Lonzo allows them defensively to have some like overall versatility, because he can really switch 1 through 4. He can't really guard 4s, but if you need him to because of his size, he should still be able to defensively be able to guard them. And him and Caruso, I think, in terms of backcourt defense, is something that the Bulls desperately needed. Last year, Kobe White, Thomas Satoransky, Zach LaVine, there's no backcourt defenders that you have now. I'm sorry. Then now you have.
Are you taking the over?
I'm not taking the over. I'm taking even.
Okay.
So I'm taking even. So if taking it even means taking it over, I'm going 53 wins. That's what I said.
Okay.
I think they can get to 53 wins. I think it really just depends on Zach LaVine. Like, how much better is he gonna make the guys around him?
Yeah. Definitely.
When he doesn't have the ball, how good is he gonna be as a cutter now that he has a true point guard that is a passer? Like him and Lonzo should reasonably every game connect for 2 to 3 lobs. That's how good of a lob passer and a lob threat Zach LaVine is, and Lonzo Ball can be as a combo. Even just seeing what even just seeing what Lonzo Ball was able to do with his little bit of opportunity to hold the ball with Zion Williamson and the lobs that he was able to give Zion
Incredible.
and the cuts
Yeah.
to the rims.
Yeah.
If he can do that with Zach, that should take the burden of Zach needing to create offense for at least 2 to 3 possessions. And then you think about how many other easy baskets and easy opportunities they should be able to get because you have an actual point guard there. So 5 of his shots next year should come much, much easier than they did last year. And then he should be able to take 1.5 less shots now, because he has a guy like DeMar, where when on nights when he just wants to take a break off, give DeMar the ball in the mid range and move out of the way. That's a bucket. And anywhere beyond 18 feet, we got to worry. But 15 feet and in, that's a bucket. Vucevic can stretch out and hit a 3. He can also pretty much, from 15 feet and in, that's automatic. The only real weak spot that I see for this Bulls team is in front court defense off the bench. They have no defenders in the front court off the bench. Laurie has made it known that he does not want to re-sign, that he said today through his agent, I believe, that he wants a fresh start. It looks like he's most likely going to wind up in Charlotte. So if it's a sign and trade, maybe, I don't know who you get back from the Hornets for Laurie. But if they want to give up, one of those young, centers or power forwards that they have in Charlotte, I'll take them, because the Bulls don't have any any front court depth off the bench. And that's really where I think that they're going to be missing a lot of opportunities defensively. And that might be the thing that might hurt them. Like the Brooklyn Nets last year, they didn't necessarily have a strong front court defense, but they still had DeAndre Jordan, Jared Allen for a certain amount of time, and Claxton off the bench can all block shots. Now, can they stop anyone in the interior? No. But do they have at least an interior threat? They did, in terms of defensively being able to block shots. They had 3 of them. The Bulls don't have any interior defensive threats. Right. So that's the biggest thing that I hope that they can address as free agency wanes down and the last little bit of pieces, kind of come off the board. Also, a guy like Paul Millsap, he's still technically a free agent. If he wants to come in and take the minimum, sign Paul Millsap. That's defense off the bench. He can give you probably about 12 points off the bench if you need him to. He was still solid in Denver. It's just that team is getting younger and built more around Michael Porter Jr. and Nikola Jokic. So I think they have the opportunities to make plays and be able to really operate like a franchise that is one of the top franchises in the NBA versus whatever they've been operating like for the past decade. So I'll leave it there.
No, that's great. And, in terms of that, in terms of that front court defensive depth, we saw how important that was with Milwaukee. Mm-hmm. We saw how important that was in the night and day change for the Lakers between the championship year and then last year. And obviously there were other differences as well, but we saw that. We saw what the guys did in Toronto. Gasol and some of Siakam's development. So yeah, but if that's where you're at least that's where we're at, where we're talking about that's the piece. Yeah. That's the element, not we've got major holes in our starting line.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
100%. So, Jack, I appreciate you for joining me today on the Bulls Fan Podcast. Everyone out there watching, if you're watching this video, make sure you drop a like, as well as if you're listening to us in your ear in podcast format, be sure to rate and subscribe, as well as like this podcast on Spotify, on Stitcher as well. You can search it, Bulls Fan Podcast, on any of your podcast, platforms, or Bulls Fan HNB Media. It should pop up. Or you can just search Hoops and Brews and you can find us that way as well. As always, we appreciate the fans for joining. I appreciate my special guest today. Jack, go ahead once again, talk to the people about your upcoming projects and what you have and where they can find your stuff at. And then we're going to get on out of here.
Definitely. No, I appreciate it, man. I love everything that you're doing, everything that you and Pav are doing.
Thank you.
What Scott's doing with his show. Just
thank you.
And then seeing the bigs and Joe team up, and just there's a lot of good things happening. Yeah. So I appreciate it. As a fan, I appreciate it.
Thank you. Seriously. Yeah, like the fact that you actually enjoy the content is all that matters to us. So thank you. Definitely 100%, appreciate it.
100%. Looks good. Sounds good. Is good. Like the substance mixed with the presentation.
Thank you.
So my book is 6 Rings. It's going to be out but right now you can read all the interviews, get all the research on the newsletter, readjack.substack.com. That is for the low price of packs in a month, or Pippen a year. And we've got pieces coming up on the triangle, a focus on Luke Longley, a couple focuses on Luke Longley. I've got a piece coming on the actual origin, the disputed origin of who designed the Bulls logo. Mm-hmm. And I've got some interviews that I did last year that I'm still sitting on with Bulls authors Sam Smith and Roland Lazenby about the Phil Krause feud and an element that kind of gets buried a little bit over assistant coach Johnny Bach. And there's some interesting elements there. And the reason I've been sitting on the interviews was that they went left in some respects, and I haven't figured out exactly how to use them yet. So there's some things coming, some more Phil stuff, and great interview that's up there right now with Scott Williams, one of my favorite Bulls from back in the day. So lots up there.
All right, perfect. Thank you, Jack. I appreciate you for joining me. And Bulls fans, as always, I appreciate you guys. Let's stay tuned in, and feel free to drop me a voicemail if you want to. I'm going to leave the number in the description. And until next time, I'll get up with you guys. Thank you. Peace.